The night it happened, the temperature in Calgary had dropped to -23, and the kind of cold that doesn't just chill you, it presses against the windows like something alive, something patient. Vincent Aldis had just finished his fourth meeting of the day. He was 51 years old, the founder and chairman of Aldis Capital Partners, a firm that managed assets worth more than $4 billion. His office on the 38th floor of the Bow Valley building had floor-to-ceiling windows that faced the Rockies on clear days. And on that particular Thursday evening in February, the mountains had disappeared entirely behind a wall of gray. He hadn't noticed. He rarely looked at them anymore. His assistant Priya knocked twice before entering. She set a folder on his desk and said quietly, "Your reservation at Charcot is confirmed for 7. And your son called again." Vincent didn't look up from the document he was reading. "Tell him I'll call tomorrow." Priya paused at the door. She had worked for Vincent for 11 years, and in that time she had learned the difference between his various silences. This one, she knew, meant the conversation was over. She left without another word. He arrived at Charcot exactly on time. Vincent was always exactly on time, and was shown to his usual corner table, the one tucked against the far wall where he could see the room without being part of it. The restaurant was warm and candlelit, the kind of place where Calgary's oil and finance crowd came to spend money without thinking about it. Vincent ordered the braised short rib and a glass of Barolo, and he opened his phone and began reading through the evening's emails. He almost missed her. She was standing just inside the front entrance, near the host station, in a coat that was 2 sizes too large and the color of old snow, once white, now the gray of exhaustion. She was small, 10, maybe 11 years old. Her hair was dark and pulled back in a braid that had mostly come undone, and she was clutching a paper bag against her chest with both arms, the way children hold things they're afraid of losing. The host was bending down, speaking to her in a low, firm voice. The girl was shaking her head. Vincent watched. He watched the host gesture toward the door. He watched the girl take a small step back but not leave. He watched her chin lift just slightly. That particular kind of stubbornness that belongs only to children who have had to practice it. Then she turned her head and her eyes moved through the restaurant until they found him. He looked back down at his phone. 30 seconds later, she was standing at his table. He didn't look up immediately. In his experience, if you didn't acknowledge something, it often went away. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was steady. That surprised him. He looked up. Up close, she was thinner than he'd registered from across the room, with dark circles beneath her eyes that had no business being on a face that young. Her coat had a tear along the left shoulder, badly mended with what looked like electrical tape. She was shivering, though she was trying very hard not to show it. "This table is reserved," he said. "I know," she said. I asked who was sitting here." She shifted the paper bag in her arms. "I need to talk to you, Mr. Aldis." That stopped him. "You know my name. I looked you up," she said simply. "I've been waiting outside for 40 minutes. The man at the front wouldn't let me in, so I waited until someone left the door open." Vincent set his phone down. "How old are you?" 11. "Where are your parents?" Something moved across her face, brief, tightly controlled. "My mom's at the hospital. That's why I'm here." He studied her for a moment, the bag in her arms, the tape on her coat, the careful way she was holding herself together. "Sit down," he said, against every instinct he had. She sat. Her name was Juniper. "June," she said. Most people called her June. She went to Balmoral School in the Northwest, and her mother's name was Viveka. And Viveka had been a nurse at the Foothills Hospital for 9 years until 8 months ago, when she was diagnosed with something called a glioblastoma, which June explained with the clinical precision of a child who had looked the word up many times and repeated it until it no longer frightened her, though it still did. "It's a brain tumor," she said, "grade 4. The doctors say it's very aggressive." Vincent said nothing. "She had surgery," June continued, "and radiation, and chemo. But the chemo makes her sick and she can't." She stopped, started again. "The treatment is working a little, but there's a newer one, a clinical trial, at the Ottawa Brain Institute." She reached into the paper bag and produced a printed document, creased from handling, and slid it across the table toward him. "I printed everything." He didn't touch it. "The trial is covered," she said, "but the flights and the temporary housing and the... My mom can't work right now, and We don't have anyone, and the hospital social worker helped us with some things, but not enough, and I did the math. She looked at him directly. It's $46,000. For everything. For 3 months. Vincent looked at the document on the table between them, then at her. And you came to me, he said. Because you went to Balmoral, she said. When you were little, I found an article. You said it in an interview once. That Balmoral was where you first learned that. She seemed to be recalling the exact words. That numbers could tell you a story, if you knew how to listen. She paused. I thought maybe you'd remember what it felt like, to be a kid there. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Vincent picked up his wine glass, then set it down without drinking. Who sent you here? He said. His voice had shifted, taken on the particular flatness he used in negotiations when he thought someone was trying to maneuver him. Who put you up to this? June frowned. Nobody. A child doesn't walk into a restaurant alone at night with a printed proposal and a $46,000 number, he said. Who helped you? I did the research myself, she said. I've been doing research for 2 months. I went to 4 other people first. Something flickered in her expression. None of them talked to me as long as you have. He should have called someone, the host, a manager. He should have had her gently, firmly removed and called the number for Calgary's child welfare line and returned to his short rib and his Barolo and his emails. He knew that. What's in the bag? He said instead. She reached in and produced a small plastic container, the kind from a dollar store, with a blue lid snapped shut. She set it on the table. Butter tarts, she said. I made them, I thought. She stopped, looked down at the container. I don't know. I thought if I brought something, it wouldn't just be me asking for something. She looked up. My mum taught me how to make them. She says you should never go to someone's house empty-handed. Or a restaurant, or wherever. A pause. I didn't know what else to bring. Vincent stared at the plastic container with its blue lid. He thought about his son, Marcus, who had called twice that week, and whom he had not called back. He thought about the Rockies behind the glass on clear days and how long it had been since he had actually looked at them. He thought about Balmoral School, the worn linoleum hallways, his grade 5 teacher, Mrs. Chen, who had stayed after class to show him, specifically him, that numbers were not just numbers. Leave the document, he said. His voice came out differently than he intended. And the tarts. June blinked. Go home, he said. It's too cold and too late for you to be out. Will you? I said leave the document. He didn't say anything else. She stood slowly, as if she wasn't sure she believed what was happening. She straightened her coat. She took the empty paper bag and folded it neatly in half and tucked it under her arm. Thank you for talking to me, she said, with a formality that made him feel, suddenly and inexplicably, ashamed. She walked back through the restaurant, past the host who watched her with relief, and out through the glass door into the February dark. Vincent sat alone at his corner table. He pulled the document toward him and began to read. He did not call the number at the top of the document that night. He did not call it the next morning. He had his assistant run a background check. Standard practice, he told himself. Due diligence. And everything came back exactly as June had described. Viveka Sorensen, 43. Registered nurse, Foothills Hospital, currently on leave. Diagnosis confirmed. Trial at Ottawa Brain Institute confirmed. One daughter, Juniper, age 11, enrolled at Balmoral School honor roll. Priya set the report on his desk and said nothing. What? He said. Nothing, she said. Priya. She looked at him steadily. She's 11 years old and she did a pitch deck, Vincent. He looked back at the report. That afternoon he called his son. Marcus was 26 and he lived in Vancouver, and the conversation lasted 12 minutes, which was longer than their recent ones had been. Near the end, Marcus said carefully, You seem different today. And Vincent said, I'm not different. And Marcus said, okay, in the way that meant he didn't believe it. After he hung up, Vincent sat for a while looking at the Calgary skyline, which was doing something complicated and orange in the late afternoon light. Then he picked up the document and read it again. He had his lawyer draw up an agreement. Not a donation. He told himself it wasn't a donation, a conditional grant, tied to the trial acceptance and disbursed in phases, with receipts required and a direct payment mechanism to the Ottawa Institute. Clean, documented, structured the way he structured everything. But before he called the number on the document, he did something he hadn't planned. He called Balmoral School. He asked to speak with the principal, and when she came on the line, he said, I'm an alumnus. I believe you have a student named Juniper Sorensen, and the principal, whose name was Ms. Ibarra said yes carefully, in the way people see when they're not sure what comes next. She's good at math, he said. A pause. Then Miss Ibarra said, Mr. Aldous, June is one of the most remarkable students I've encountered in 20 years of education. She tutors her classmates. She's been running the school's coat and supply drive for 2 years. And when her mother got sick, another pause. She hasn't missed a single day. Vincent thanked her and ended the call. He sat for a long time. He was not, by any measure, a sentimental man. He had built what he built by being clear-eyed about risk, unsentimental about loss, and rigorous in the separation of emotion from analysis. These were not flaws, in his view. They were the entire architecture of every good decision he'd ever made, but he kept seeing the blue lid of the dollar store container, the electrical tape on the coat, the way June had said, I don't know. I thought if I brought something, it wouldn't just be me asking for something. He picked up the phone. He didn't meet Viveka until the following week. June had given him her mother's number, written in the careful round handwriting of someone who still printed their letters. And he had texted first, old habit, give people time to prepare, and then they had arranged a call, which became a visit to the apartment in the northwest part of the city where the Sorensens lived, a third-floor unit with mismatched furniture and a wall covered in June school projects, and a window that looked out over a parking lot, and, beyond it, a small stand of spruce trees. Viveka was sitting in an armchair when he arrived. She was thin in the way the illness made people thin, carefully, as if her body was rationing itself, but her eyes were sharp, and she looked at Vincent for a long moment before she said anything. You're taller than I expected, she said. People say that. She told me what she did. Viveka glanced toward the hallway, where June had disappeared to give them privacy. Going to the restaurant, waiting outside in the cold, she looked back at him. I didn't know. She didn't tell me she was doing it. I would have. She stopped. I'm not sure what I would have done. She was very prepared, Vincent said. She's been researching that trial for 6 weeks. Viveka's voice was careful, measured. He understood. She'd had to learn to talk about her own illness the way you talk about the weather, something present and unchangeable and to be accounted for. She understands the science better than some of the residents I used to work with. She got that from you. Viveka shook her head slightly. She got it from herself. There was a comfortable silence between them then, the kind that arrives between people who have both learned to speak efficiently and don't feel the need to fill space. I don't want charity, Viveka said finally. Not with pride, exactly. More like clarity. I've been a nurse for 15 years. I know what help looks like when it comes with strings, and I know what it looks like when it doesn't. I'm asking you honestly. Which kind is this? Vincent thought about the documents his lawyer had drawn up. The phases, the receipts, the structured disbursement. I want to make sure the money goes where it's supposed to go, he said. That's the structure. Beyond that, no strings. Viveka studied him. Why? She said. He could have given her several good answers. Strategic philanthropy, alumnus connection to the school, corporate social responsibility. All of them would have been partially true. Instead, he said, your daughter brought me butter tarts at a restaurant where the short rib costs $42. Viveka's face did something quiet and complicated, and then, for the first time since he'd arrived, she smiled. The acceptance came in March. June called him to tell him he'd given her his direct number, another thing he hadn't planned, and she said, we got in. The trial. We're in, and her voice cracked on the last word in the way voices do when they've been held together very tightly for a very long time. That's good news, he said. Yeah, a breath. Yeah, it is. There was a pause, and then she said, Mr. Aldous, can I ask you something? Why did you do it? Like, actually, you could have just, you didn't have to. And I know I came to you, but I also kind of thought you'd call security or whatever. A small pause. 4 other people basically did. He thought about the question seriously, which was the only way he thought about questions. I went to Balmoral, he said, in 1985. I had a teacher named Mrs. Chen, who is probably retired now or possibly no longer alive. She stayed after class every Tuesday to show me things about numbers that weren't in the curriculum. She didn't have to. Nobody asked her to. He paused. I never thanked her. I've thought about that more than once. June was quiet for a moment. So I'm like an opportunity, she said. "You're not an opportunity," he said, more sharply than he meant to. Then more carefully, "You're a kid who did something extraordinary. Those are different things." "Okay," she said. He could hear something settling in her voice. "Okay." The setbacks came in May. Viveka's first month in the trial had gone carefully, guardedly well. The new treatment was tolerable, the preliminary results cautiously promising, and June had gone to Ottawa with her for the first 2 weeks before coming back to Calgary to finish the school year. She'd been staying with a neighbor, Mrs. Okafor, an older woman who left containers of jollof rice outside the door on Tuesday nights. But in May, the numbers shifted. Not collapsed. The oncologist was careful with his language when he called, which Vincent had by then joined as an authorized contact on Viveka's care circle, with her permission, shifted. A new shadow, a region of concern. More tests needed. Vincent was in a board meeting when his phone lit up with June's name. He excused himself. He had never, in 22 years of running his company, excused himself from a board meeting for a personal call. In the hallway, June's voice was flat in the particular way that meant she was managing herself very hard. "They found something else," she said. "They don't know what it means yet. They're doing more scans tomorrow." "Okay," he said. "I'm not." She stopped. "I'm in school right now. I'm in the bathroom. I have a history exam in 20 minutes. "June." "I'm fine," she said immediately. "You're 11 years old and your mother is in a hospital in another province, and you have a history exam in 20 minutes, he said. "You're not fine, and that's allowed." A long silence. Then, very quietly, "I'm scared." "I know," he said. "What if it doesn't work?" He stood in the corporate hallway with its gray carpet and its framed art and its particular brand of expensive, curated calm, and he thought about what it would mean to answer that question honestly. He thought about what his answer would have been 6 months ago, actuarial, probabilistic, something about risk-adjusted outcomes. "I don't know," he said. "I don't have a good answer for that. I'm sorry." Another silence. "Okay," she had finally. "Okay, thank you for saying that instead of something fake." "Go take your history exam," he said. "Yeah," a breath. "Mr. Aldous?" "Yes, I'm glad you ate at that restaurant." He stood in the hallway for a moment after she hung up. Then he went back into the board meeting and sat down and said, "Where were we?" and finished the afternoon's business. But when Priya brought him the evening's reading, he set it aside. He called Marcus instead. They talked for 40 minutes, which was the longest they'd spoken in 3 years. Marcus said, near the end, "I don't know what's going on with you, but I like this version." And Vincent said, "Don't push it," and Marcus laughed, which was a sound Vincent realized he hadn't heard in much too long. The second set of results came back better. Not good, not yet. This was medicine, not a story, and Viveka's oncologist was not in the habit of using words like good prematurely, but better. The shadow had more definition. It was stable. The trial protocol would continue. June texted him a single line, "The numbers are better. My mom says hi." He texted back, "Tell her hi." Then, after a moment, "Good work on the history exam." Her response was a string of small maple leaf emojis, which he did not entirely understand but interpreted correctly as a good sign. By July, Viveka was home. Not cured. He had learned enough by then to understand that cured was not a word the medical world used lightly, and glioblastoma was not the kind of illness that accepted it easily. But stable. Home. Sitting in the small apartment in the northwest with the parking lot view, and the spruce trees and the wall, covered in June's school projects, which now had a new addition, a certificate from a provincial math competition, first place, age 11 to 13 division. Vincent came for dinner on a Sunday in late July, because June had invited him and he had said yes, before he'd thought about it long enough to say anything else. Viveka cooked something called Jansen's Temptation, a Swedish potato dish her grandmother had made, and June set the table with exaggerated care, placing the forks and knives with the precision of someone who had decided this mattered. They ate together, the three of them, while the July light came in long and golden through the window and fell across the table and the mismatched chairs and the certificate on the wall. Viveka said, at some point during the meal, "You're different than I thought you'd be." "You said that last time," Vincent said. "I know. I keep meaning it more." June, who had been eating with the focused efficiency of someone making up for skipped lunches, looked up. "She means you're less scary," she said. "She thought you'd be scary." "June," Viveka said. He asked. He didn't ask. His face asked. Vincent looked between them, The particular frequency of this exchange, mother and daughter, the ease of it despite everything it had cost them to get here. He thought about Marcus, who was coming to Calgary in September. He thought about Mrs. Chen and the Tuesday afternoons that had shaped the entire architecture of his life, which he had never acknowledged and never thanked her for. He thought about a girl standing at a host's station in a coat, held together with electrical tape, holding a plastic container with a blue lid, choosing not to leave. "She's right," he said. "I was scary. For a long time." Viveka looked at him. "Not anymore," she said. He considered the question with the same rigor he applied to everything. "I'm working on it," he said. June nodded with the gravity of a judge handing down a reasonable sentence. "That's probably the right answer," she said. Outside, the spruce trees caught the last of the July light and held it for a moment, brief, bright, and unreasonably beautiful, before it moved on.